Joining us now, NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Cheung, managing editor of The Bulwark and MSNBC contributor Sam Stein, and senior editor at The Atlantic and host of Radio Atlantic, Hanna Rosin. Brian, first off, explain the trade relationship with Brazil.
Yeah, so a lot of Americans might be tuning into the news of the Brazil tariffs and wondering how is that going to impact the things that I buy at the store. Brazil exports a lot of major goods that we see at the grocery store on a daily basis, most namely coffee. So we are a major importer of coffee from Brazil, also things like orange juice as well as produce. We even import some crude oil. So when you think about a 50% tariff, which would be effective August 1st, unless Brazil can negotiate with the United States, then all of those things could, in theory, get 50% more expensive for the consumer as well. You make another important point about the politics of all of this as well. Up until now, we had seen a lot of the letters that the president had been publishing on Truth Social to countries where the United States has a trade deficit, where they don't buy as many things from the United States as the United States buys from them. Brazil is the first country that we've seen in a letter so far this week that buys more from the United States than the U.S. buys from Brazil. We have a trade surplus with that country to the magnitude of almost $7.5 billion. So, again, that's the reason why the rhetoric is also from the president about Jair Bolsonaro as opposed to about the country cheating us through a trade deficit, because we don't have a trade deficit with Brazil. Again, we have a trade surplus, Kate.
Is there any way to look at our trade relationship with Brazil, Brian, and to see something unfair going on? Anything that would justify Donald Trump trying to use trade as a cudgel?
Well, again, even when you look at the letter that he sent to Brazil, it is completely restructured from what we had seen as the copy and paste job for every other country that he had sent letters to earlier this week, including to South Korea, to Japan, to smaller countries like Kazakhstan, Moldova. With Brazil, he started the letter essentially with an entire paragraph about how he felt Brazil was unfairly treating Jair Bolsonaro. So this kind of underscores that the president isn't going to succeed in using the trade deficit, and they are cheating us in a trade relationship as the excuse to do this type of tariff. But again, the question here is, can Brazil then still negotiate with the United States? Because that is still very much relevant to this conversation as it is with any country that we have a trade deficit with. There is a timeline now. There's a few weeks until August 1st. And can the Brazilian government convince the United States to not put that 50% tariff in place? That is the open question at this point in time.
Hanna, why does the president care about Bolsonaro?
That's the key question. I mean, using economic policy to affect another country's behavior is not unheard of. We certainly put sanctions on other countries when they, say, commit human rights violations. This is something completely different. Bolsonaro is not even the current president. So actually what you're interfering with is the legal system of the country in defense of someone who did exactly what Trump did. This was essentially a January 6th type move where Bolsonaro sent his supporters to riot, to protest the results of the election. So it's almost like he's just finding a friend out there in the world who he wants to defend and then using that to somehow bully Brazil's legal system. It's very unusual.
Well, let me read this from the Washington Post about what happened after the insurrection in Brazil compared to what happened here after the insurrection on January 7th. They write, quote, Bolsonaro was barred from seeking public office until 2030 by the country's top electoral court, even as separate police investigations continued. In November, Brazil's federal police recommended charges against Bolsonaro, as well as dozens of his associates, for allegedly leading a plot to subvert the will of voters, assassinate political rivals, and stay in power by military edict following his 2022 electoral defeat. The police report was submitted to Brazil's Supreme Court, and the country's top prosecutorial authorities are weighing what to do next. So what's interesting, Sam, is that he did this 2 years after Donald Trump's supporters did this. He used the same rhetoric that Donald Trump used, that if I lose this election, it means the election was rigged. The left is rigging it against me. He was trying to cite abnormalities in voter data or machines. The country quickly struck him down. The court struck him down and said that didn't exist. It's not happening. But unlike the United States, the democracy down there in Brazil and the judiciary down there in Brazil has been able to bring a case against the former president. They have been able to bar the former president, who was accused of doing all this, from running for office again.
Yeah, and I think Trump picks up on that. I think Trump recognizes that there are parallels between what happened with him in 2020 and what happened with Bolsonaro. I will also note that if you're around conservative politics these days, for instance, any CPAC gathering, the Bolsonaros are a fixture there. Bolsonaro's son has made inroads with the MAGA movement. He's definitely tried to forge strong relationships with top Trump allies. Bolsonaro himself has cast himself as a Trump-like figure. And so maybe that's playing on Trump's ego a little bit. And certainly Trump has in the past and frankly in the present tried to craft these alliances with these sort of unsavory autocratic figures, of which Bolsonaro is one. So that all probably is playing a role here. And the other thing I just would say is, maybe this is unique to Brazil, but in the abstract, Trump really loves this idea of just being able to sort of negotiate on a whim with any nation whatsoever, right? I mean, these letters, if you read them, they're kind of ridiculous, right? It's not a real. The template's odd. There's all capitalizations. Weirdly, he's trying to have all these deals. He's got this deadline coming up. Clearly, they haven't gotten 90 deals in 90 days. They've done an extension. I think Trump does like being in the mix here in terms of the negotiation. And in this case, it's not even the use of national security as a template or as something to justify the tariffs, because it's very, very, very specifically about domestic political considerations in Brazil.
Yeah, but let's linger on that for another second and why Donald Trump cares so much. I mean, you mentioned there that he kind of sees himself in Bolsonaro, that they're similar types of leaders. I mean, Bolsonaro was called the Trump of the tropics while he was in office. Yeah. He was very anti-COVID restrictions. He was aggressive in the way that Donald Trump has been aggressive. Is that all there is to it? That Donald Trump just sees him as an ally, sees him as a friend, sees him as a counterpart or a mini-me, and wants to interfere in another democracy? Like use the cudgel of trade in another democracy, raise prices for Americans for coffee and other essentials because he likes this guy and doesn't think that democracy down there should behave as that democracy behaves?
I'm not saying it's all of it, but I do think it's part of it. And you can look at another avenue here, or another vehicle, or another theater, I should say. Recently, Donald Trump has dove into Israeli domestic politics, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in his own judicial standoff, own corruption trial. Trump has not totally implicitly and somewhat explicitly said, U.S. aid to Israel is fairly pronounced, that we give them a ton of money for weaponry, and he's made it seem as if the cases are not dropped against Netanyahu, that could be at risk. This is another instance of Trump using the levers of American diplomacy, but also our economic might to achieve domestic political ends in other international countries. So I do think he sees an alliance with Bolsonaro. I do think he sees a partnership with Bolsonaro, and I do think he's trying to leverage that by using tariffs and trade.
Brian, let me ask you about the tech side of things, because there's also another wrinkle to this. This is Donald Trump accusing the Brazilians of not being fair to American tech.
Yeah, this is what they would call, I believe, a Section 301 review, where there would have to be some sort of Commerce Department review of what the Brazilian government does with regards to American big tech companies, be it a Meta or an Apple, in terms of their services that they offer in Brazil, and the way that the Brazilian government might be regulating or allowing those companies to compete against domestic Brazilian companies. The tech side of things has been an interesting wrinkle that's entered the tariff conversation, most recently with Canada, where the Canadian government had decided to add a tax on American digital services, like, for example, Meta, that might be operating in Canada. And that really drew the ire of the president, who then ratcheted up and dramatically escalated, seemingly overnight, the tariff rates on Canada, such that Canada then backed off of that. So this is kind of the other prong of the tariff conversation that we have also heard bubbling up in the likes of France, where they have proposed something very similar in taxing digital services as well. That is something that is also likely to prod at the president as these tariff negotiations continue around the world.
Hannah, it's just so surprising that we live in a country with a president, I guess maybe I'm being naive here, but where he wants to actively interfere in another democracy in this way. Am I being naive? Is this what Americans do? Is it what we've done in the past? Are we always looking You tell me.
No. It's not what we've always done in the past. We certainly interfere in the politics of many other countries. We overthrow presidents. We're not so naivist to think this is the first time, but this is so overt, so specific. It doesn't seem to be for the good of the Brazilians or for the good of us. It's just very hard to see what the strategy is here. I mean, as always with Donald Trump, you could say this is just whimsy. Like he likes to be in the mix of things, and so this is how he wants to be in the mix of this. The worst case scenario is that he's trying to create an alliance of autocrats, and he's at the head of the alliance. And who knows what the ultimate goal of that? The ultimate goal of that is to bring in all the heads of tech companies, have them be unbridled anywhere in the country, and people who have dictatorial tendencies. So that's the maybe more conspiratorial view.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it's figuring out the why of this all that I think is so important. Why does he care so much? Is it just that he sees him as a familiar face or a friend, or he wants to just exert his authority and see how far it'll get him? Worth exploring. Sam Stein, Hanna Rosin, Brian Cheung, everyone, thank you.